Thank you, everyone. Kia ora. Welcome. I'm Gerry Lynch, and this is a Government 365 webinar for directors and CEOs and others in key governance roles that's practical, modern, and fit for hopefully what's coming next. We'll see. Government 365 exists for a simple reason. Governance has become much harder, more change, more risk, more scrutiny, and now AI has added to that mix in the middle of it. Most leaders I speak with are asking the same questions. Where do we start? How do I get value without getting into too much risk? And what should a board actually be asking for? So all good questions, and we'll come to many of them. Today really is about giving you clarity. We'll focus on what directors and CEOs need to know, what good looks like, and what you can do in the next 30 to 60 days to move from curious and asking questions to being more confident in terms of your governance. So I'm joined by Laurence, who's works with leadership teams to make AI real in organizations, turning it into action and practical lessons. And he has a course, which we may mention at the end, for leadership teams and boards that can really build the capability to be confident in this area. Please drop questions into the chat as we go, and I'll just keep an eye on those and bring them in where relevant. And what I'll do is we'll share a short takeaway at the end, and we'll also go back to people with summary of the conversation, any key tips and tricks that come out of it afterwards as well. So Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here, Gerry.
Excellent. So start us off, can you give us 60-second version, if you like? What do you do and what are you seeing in the market right now?
Yep. So we're a full-scale AI consultancy company. Full-scale meaning we approach this as we don't build AI technology. We don't sell AI technology. We make the technology pragmatic and practical for New Zealand, predominantly for New Zealand SMEs, although we're starting to do more work with a couple of the universities, with some government departments as well as some larger organizations. But really it's around how do you make this technology pragmatic? How do you make it tangible? How do you make it real at all strata of an organization? Because AI requires different things of different strata. So obviously we're talking board, senior governance, which requires a different set of what we call AI capabilities and literacy than C-suites who we work directly with, and then the operational layers of an organization. We touch them all, we help them all, we have programs, we have training, we have strategic guidance. To wrap it all up in a nutshell, it's to acknowledge that AI actually is not a technology challenge. It's a people, it's a leadership, it's a governance challenge. Used properly, this technology will infuse into every nook and cranny of an organization, every piece of operation, every piece of strategy, every people function that you have. And so it's not so much just how do we get the subscriptions and get moving. It's everything around that, which is a full cultural and leadership transformation too. So that's what we do. We love doing it. It's fast moving. We've been in this space since before ChatGPT hit the ground. We have watched the market move, and that's why we're very happy to be in the space we're in, where we're not just teaching people how to use ChatGPT. It really is around full organizational transformation.
Yeah. Okay. So if just a hypothetical situation, if you joined a board tomorrow, what would be the first 3 AI value bets you'd look for? And on the other side, what would make you not want to fund them?
Would you like me to comment on what I'd be looking for within the board themselves or within the organization?
Yeah. Start with the board. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So one of our fundamental principles is this all starts with senior leadership. So as a board, do you have AI capability and do you have AI literacy? Because what is true is until people of any level whether they're your fresh-faced new intern or the chairman of the board, unless you fundamentally understand the foundations of how to use these tools, i.e., you can, to a reasonable level, you can use your chat GPTs or your Copilot, etc. Can you use them properly? Because if you can't, you'll have a paradigm of belief about this technology that it's just for changing the tone of voice of an email or summarizing a long document. Until you can use these tools very well, and you've fundamentally felt the power of being able to do things that used to take days can be done in 25 minutes, etc., etc. When it's a tangible feeling, boards can extrapolate and they can say, right, I now have a feeling of what does this mean for this department, this team, this function that we do. And you can also extrapolate to say, well, what does that mean for our value proposition? How's this affecting internally? How's this affecting our external stakeholders and relationships and our place in the industry at large? And so the first three value bets are all wrapped up in one. Do you have a governance team of board of directors and the senior execs who are very competent users of the tools? You don't have to be technologists, right? But can you use them well? And from there, do you have that we call it the strategic implications? Do you understand the strategic implications of what this technology really means to all facets of the organization? So has the governance layer engaged in training, engaged in AI literacy understanding? Because if not, that leaves a vacuum, which we can talk about what fills into that vacuum.
So what does fill into that vacuum then? So if I'm on a board and I go, well, I use Chat GPT at home, I sort of know a little bit about it. Is that good enough in terms of if you have a group of directors that are just playing around with Chat GPT and they sort of, they don't know what they don't know. So what's good, what's average, what's poor?
I'd summarize this by saying there was actually a shift since about November last year through particularly January and February this year. There was a shift in the power of these tools, the capability of these tools that we actually think was bigger than the 0 to 1 moment when ChatGPT hit the world, right? And we all know that was a seismic moment. Over January, February this year, there's been a new era, which is called the agentic era of AI, which effectively means these things can work autonomously for minutes or hours without a human. The human sets the objective, says, I want you to achieve this. And the technology will work for tens of minutes, even hours, using your computer, using all the software you have available on your computer, using your email, using the World Wide Web to click and interact to produce those outputs. There's a very interesting benchmark which came out around August last year. Finally, we have an economic benchmark about how are these tools actually affecting economically productive GDP-related tasks and workflows. The quality of this new generation of tools, they are performing to the equivalent of 14-year industry veterans across more than 100 industries that they've profiled. So it's a long way of saying, if you're using and experimenting with these, and you've been tinkering with these tools, that's great, but you're in a past paradigm. I speak to you as directors, but I also say if that's where your organization is, what we call this is the adoption capability gap. The technology is here. Most adoption in New Zealand is here. And that gap, depending on where you are in it, presents either pretty radical opportunity or some very direct threat, right? And that's the vacuum that we're talking about that gets filled. And so you did ask that. One of the most One of the most powerful and invisible things that fills that vacuum is what we call shadow AI, which is there are now dozens and dozens of surveys and studies that prove this. It's a global phenomenon. If there is in a lack of leadership and real uh, direction from governance around AI, people are voting. They're buying their own personal subscriptions to these tools. They're bringing them to work, and they're using what we call shadow AI. Almost all surveys say that it's around somewhere between 75 and 80% of employees admit, of course, anonymously, admit to shadow AI use, right? And so what that tells us is two things. The technology is working. If it wasn't, people wouldn't be engaging with shadow AI. It also tells us, once again, from a governance point of view, there's incredible risk there with people using these tools personally, putting company data and IP into them, and using them from a relatively naive point of view, in terms of they haven't had good training to be using them powerfully and safely. So we've got deep quickly, but those are the things that we're scanning for very early when we start to work with organizations. It's also what we build our solutions around, obviously.
Yeah. So you talked about three bets, and you talked about the one being the board and senior executive getting, their literacy and their capability up to scratch. What are the other two areas that you would invest in an organisation, or you'd want to see bets being placed by the board?
Yeah. Are the senior leaders using this technology as thinking and strategic partners, not just doing tools? And also, is there benchmarking and regular assessment of what measurable outcomes has the technology produced so far? Because everybody has pilots now, everybody has pilot programs going, everybody has community of practice, everyone has discussion groups and learning, lunch and learns, etc. What is the measurable outcome that has come so far from AI? And this is a big question because AI asks us to measure it in different ways from traditional software. We promote, our concept is we have what we call hard ROI from AI and squishy. Everybody's looking for the hard ROI, which is where is it showing up in the bottom line? There's two things going on. It's a nascent technology. This is a brand new general purpose technology. Like, it's oversimplified, but if we equate it to what's the hard ROI of electricity on a company? Very hard to quantify a general purpose technology, but it can be done in pockets. So you can pick a workflow, train your people, give them the tools to be able to do that workflow or that task or that process in an AI augmented fashion. And you can measure things like, well, what's the efficiency gains or the productivity gains here just through time savings. You can get more complicated there, but you can start to layer in factors like wages and wage costs, and are we faster to market, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all you can measure hard ROI, and it's easier in like isolated use cases and workflows. And then there's the squishy ROI as well, which is like broader organizational fluency. Is there experimentation? Is there confidence building with the technology? Do people trust it more? You need both. You need the hard ROI and the squishy. But at the moment, boards are largely only looking for the hard ROI signals, which is difficult to do. This is not your traditional. That's what I'd like to say. AI is not software. We need to like get out of the mental trap of looking at this like a software engagement. This is intelligence on tap, and we measure it in different ways.
Yeah, cool. So it's really about building that capability, doing the pilots, getting confidence, building trust. Having some areas where you can measure hard outcomes, but basically, if you can see more experimentation, more pilots, then people are getting more confident. So you would expect to see more come from that. Okay. What does and we flick to the other side of the fear with AI is the risk side of things. So yes, there's lots of upside, but so in terms of good AI governance, I mean, what does that look like in plain English for a small company? What are the minimum guardrails you'd expect to see if you were on a board of a company just to help you feel more confident?
Yeah. Just before I answer that in probably the way that you're looking for, I'm it is our belief that actually one of the biggest risks with AI is inactivity. And so yes, we have to be safe. We can't let that become a paralyzation process.
Right.
We see it's more risky for an organization to be left behind by this.
Yeah.
But given that, let's talk within the
I think that's a great point because
yeah,
the fear is people do nothing and think they've managed the risks, and when actually what you're saying is one of the biggest risks is the opportunity cost of doing nothing.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
And
Yeah.
so I'll go back to, and you'll all get sick of me saying this. You'll be like, okay, mate, I've heard that point, but governance has to come after literacy, not before. So I'll go back to that. First, we need AI capable and AI literate boards and senior leadership teams. Then, what are the minimum guardrails, which you're getting at here, Gerry? It's like, and so this is guardrails are around how do we create these really like robust usage policies that reflect where the technology is, but also take into account our people. So within those, you basically have got kind of three main components. It's like data classification. What are we happy for people with the tools that they have available to them? What are we happy for to go into those tools? What kind of data? What kind of IP? What kind of documents? And what do we say is restricted and you don't want to go in there, right? And there is a misconception about how, or let me say, in this sense, you actually can consider AI as software. They have very, very robust privacy mechanisms within them, which, when switched on and when adhered to by your people, can be really trusted. But you should never be putting like truly sensitive data in there, what we call PII, right? Financials, people's email addresses, physical addresses, etc., etc. So clear data classification, what can go into the tools, what can't. Um, we teach a tiered tool framework, which is like the basic chat bots, your ChatGPTs, Gemini, Copilot, Flawed. They're low risk, right? When they're just chatbots, they're very low risk. Then when you have the embedded chatbots, which is basically Copilot. If you're a Microsoft organization, that's embedded into all of your Microsoft tools. And if you're a Google organization, you have Gemini, which is embedded into your Google Drive and your Gmail and things like that. They are medium risk. And then we have full, as I described, they've come online in the last few months, full agentic AI tools, which not only have access to all of your software and data environment, they can also access the web and they can act autonomously and use your software and the web. And those are high risk, right? So are our guardrails factoring the different capabilities of the tools? And then the last part is like a simple escalation path, which is what happens when these guardrails are crossed, or if people are unsure, who do they ask? Who do they go to for guidance? So that those are kind of at a minimum. That's the scaffolding, which we then color in.
Right.
The last part I'll say on that is we encourage that guardrails and policies are built to be enabling through the way they're written and the way they're kind of disseminated. Whereas at the moment, most of the AI policies that we see, unfortunately, they suffer from this mistaken conflation with software deployments of the past, which is anyone can write a usage policy for a CRM because everyone understands what a CRM does. You can work backwards, you can kind of understand the risk factors, you can create a usage policy and you can push it out. Unfortunately, AI usage policies are being created by leaders who are by and large not AI literate and capable themselves, unfortunately. And so they're being overly restrictive and intimidating, which then are pushed out and they actually become your first almost like de facto cultural message about AI. Yeah, I'll pause there on that one.
Okay. So if you were developing a dashboard for a board in terms of
Yep.
some metrics they should look at, say quarterly for AI, what sort of things would be on that dashboard?
Yeah, that's a great question. We would look at things like, so when we're dealing with boards, we have this like general frame of reference, which is to look at access to the technology, habits, how are the habits, and then what's the value, and those happen sequentially. So if we're looking at access, for example, what percentage of your workforce has access to the sanction tools within your usage policies? If that's not at 100% or near it, you're creating shadow AI risk, right? Acknowledging for some businesses, you've got a whole workforce who are working in a factory or in a warehouse. You don't include those in your 100% calculations, right? And so also within that access and habits dashboard is like of those with access, what percentage are using those tools? We would like to see at a very minimum daily, right? Because access without habit is you're just wasting your spend.
Yeah.
And then so those are the first two. Third, I would say literacy. Are you measuring individual AI capability? We have ways to measure those, but just for the moment, let's say, are you actually measuring not how often are they using them? Because people could use them 10 times a day, as I say, just to change how an email sounds. That's not capability. So we need to measure how are they using it. We do need to measure those hard ROI case studies that we talked about earlier. You need to measure compliance. And that's where your IT team come in here. Like from a tech perspective, is this being used safely? Are there any incidents? Have we discovered any shadow AI use, etc.? And then the last one is harder to measure, but it's cultural integration. And so those are things like, is AI now being discussed and reviewed in meetings? That can be all hands meetings, can be departmental meetings, should be one-on-one meetings. Is AI starting to make its way into KPIs, into job descriptions, into your performance reviews, into the hiring recruitment practices, into the onboarding practices? All of those things are like cultural indicators of whether it's like, is AI actually becoming embedded or is it just still an add-on to what we always used to do?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I like them. There's some good ones here. In terms of if something does go wrong, so if you go to your issue of the compliance and any incident, what's
Yeah.
your recommended escalation process when something does go wrong, and who should get
Mm,
involved and how quickly?
yeah. Again, I'm going to just take a prelude to that answer to say, when we talk about things like capability lift and AI literacy lift, it should be like a founding or a really foundational principle of AI use. Everyone should understand AI does not make decisions. well, actually, it can with the autonomous tools, but the principle is anything that comes out of an AI has either your personal name on it and or your company name on it, and the accountability rests in those places, your personal name and your business name. And so anything that goes wrong, you've kind of got to start at that point. Like an escalation point is to say, right, let's stop and let's work out what's happened here. Is this a person problem? Has the person made errors and or done things they weren't sanctioned to do? Or was it an AI problem? Like maybe AI gave an incorrect answer, but the person didn't check that or spot it, right? And then also the slightly deeper part of that is this a one-off thing that just that individual human made a mistake on, or is this actually part of systematically what our AI is set up to do? So I guess the big question there is like the biggest question is, was there a human checkpoint involved in this scenario? And if so, do we kind of was it human? Was it AI? Is it a one-off? Is it systemic?
Mm.
Can I say, when we talk about the prevention part of this, of like the literacy and the capability, another thing which we encourage organizations to take on, and by all means put it into your own words, but this is the habit forming thing. When people are using AI to to produce something or just to do to produce something normally, they need to look at this, and when they're finished with it, they've polished it, they've improved it. Two questions, which is, does this represent my best work? Right? Before it goes on to a colleague, or certainly before it goes externally, does this represent my best work? And that's regardless of AI or not. And what modifications, they should be able to answer the question, what modifications did I make from this since it came out of the AI? If they reflect on those two questions like habitually, it's a really good, what's that metaphor? Uh, Fence at the top of the cliff rather than an ambulance
Mm.
at the bottom.
Yeah. So just going back to that one point around, and it's probably comes back to expectations around that human checkpoint, and because I see a lot of organisations where people will just outsource their work or their report to AI and just
Mm-hmm.
present that AI. So, those two questions obviously help with that. But is there a piece around, and I don't know whether it comes earlier in the piece around the habits or expectations, or whether it's a policy thing, or just around helping people to understand what's expected of them in this new, you know, world.
Yeah. Do I have the ability to share my screen here? Yes, I
Good
do.
question. You can try
I
it.
do. Here it is. Because I think what you've hit on there, Gerry, is this is a condensation of our whole delivery model, actually. Um, and what you're saying here, like this is what we call our five strategic building blocks to AI adoption. This is everything that needs to happen for an organization to safely, powerfully, and holistically approach AI, right? And what we always say, and you just said it in different words, is these three building blocks, they tend to take the first 12 to 18 months of an organization's engagement with AI. And they look, you know, like any framework, you put them on a page to look nice and distinct and wrapped up in a bow. Reality is they're not. Education and training fuses into cultural change, which fuses into usage policies and safety and governance. They're not like distinct things. They have to happen all in parallel. I think you described that really, really well, because education and training, it's not, okay, let's teach people just how to use ChatGPT. It's education is also what we call AI literacy, understanding all of the second order effects of the technology, how it works, things like you've touched on. People are terrified of cognitive cognitive surrender, right? Is this thing just going to make me stupid because it's going to do all the thinking for me? That's education and training, but that's not skills training, that's literacy training. And those are all the hand in hand with culture, with usage policies, etc. So thanks for bringing that up.
All right. So if we go on to a bit more on risk, so what would you say would be the top 5 AI risk scenarios that you see in organizations at the moment?
Uh, by a clear way, right out in front at the moment is shadow AI. That's just in place in almost I would say every organization. So shadow AI, data leakage, is sensitive information being put into these tools without the privacy mechanisms switched on. So those are 2. Uh,
Sorry, just in where I'd stop. You talked about the sort of medium risk being, Gemini and Copilot.
mhm.
I thought they were sort of, I suppose, enclosed, so there would be a lower risk than sort of people using Chat GPT. So what leads to the medium risk for those? Is it that they've got more access to more data?
Yeah, yeah, they do, and actually, the risk is more people and organizational control than the actual AI. What I mean by that is if you put anyone into Copilot, the paid version, where it now has access to my whole Microsoft environment. I'm not just using the chatbot. It also has access. It can read and make changes to SharePoint documents, Teams recordings, and chats. It has access to all of my files within Word and PowerPoint and Excel, etc. The risk there is not so much is that data going to escape into the world? It's actually, how do I describe this easily? My Copilot has access to all of the files and folders that I do as a person. So if the organization hasn't locked down all the permissions very well, which is just an organizational challenge, then it becomes an AI challenge because suddenly people through Copilot can say, hey, can you find me all of the wages that everyone earns in this company? And if by some reason that information hasn't been locked down to the person, it's also not locked down to their AI. So it's a distinction there.
Yeah,
The risk is less
yeah,
externally, it's more internally.
right. Okay. There's a question here before I go on to the other top 5 risks. So, do you have some examples of damage that's occurred as a result of data leakage that you're aware of?
Uh, no, not that I can talk to, and certainly not specifics to. We we don't have any horror stories from our clients, and that's not. I'm not trying to say that we have any effect on that. There's none that I can speak to from firsthand personal experience, to be
Okay.
honest.
There's one that I was told of the other day, someone in the IT world, and he said he'd heard of a person that had Googled and got hold of financials of a competitor, full financials, P&L, that weren't public. So they'd obviously
They'd Googled them.
not go. They'd gone through an AI agent and got hold of financials. So yeah, so they're obviously
Yeah.
being put on. This question here: is there any safe AI platform or program that is safe to use to analyze financial data? Good question.
It's a great question. It, yeah, I hate these answers myself. Situational. So, uh, I analyze all of our company financial data in our AI tools. I have a different risk profile from ASB Bank. Um, the shorthand answer for this is all of these tools have click of a button access to say lock down our data privacy settings. And when you lock those down, um, you can consider them as safe as any other piece of software that you would put financial data in. So you could say there's a parallel here between when I've clicked the right buttons in the back end of ChatGPT, you can feel as safe to put your profit and loss in there and analyze it as you do to house that in Xero or Microsoft, or to send it as an attachment through your email. In that case, they are no more secure and also no less secure than any other piece of software. Like, they are enterprise grade security measures, right? But also saying no software, including those others that I mentioned, Xero, Microsoft, etc., none of them are completely 100% safe. Email, certainly not, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good answer, because a lot of people will think, oh, it's unsafe just putting it in there. But what you're saying is, if you've got the right controls, you've locked down, then it's
Yeah.
as safe as anywhere else, and you should be using it to analyze your financials, and it should help, hopefully.
Well, it's so
Yeah.
powerful to be able to analyze like company data. I think it's unfortunate when people get paralyzed by the fear when these things you actually can make them as safe as any other software, and then use the incredible power of them to your benefit.
Yeah, cool. All right. So shadow AI risk number one, data leakage. Yeah, more
Yeah,
potentially internally.
yeah.
Number two, what other top
So
risks?
hallucinations being acted upon. So for those not aware, hallucinations is the technical term. I think it's a silly term. It just means sometimes AI makes things up, and it's almost impossible unless you're a real domain expert to spot those hallucinations, right? And goes into a bigger conversation of like people with 15 years experience on the job can spot hallucinations better than someone who's 1 or 2 years into the industry. But the risk there, do people just act on the hallucinations without applying their own judgment and refinement and cognition, right? So that's another one.
Is it a myth that you can put into Chat GPT, please do not hallucinate? Or is it...
100, like 1,000% myth.
Okay, right.
If you could, then that's a
Yeah.
billion-dollar industry solution. Sandra saying always ask for references for where they obtain their information. Absolutely. And click on those references, because sometimes the references can be hallucinations, and they'll point you to a page that doesn't exist. Or they'll point you to a crackpot page of conspiracy theories. So yes, I think sorry, was that Honey saying that? Sandra Honey? Great point. And it leads into my fourth one, which is people fall asleep at the wheel of these things, kind of closely related to acting on hallucinations. But how does it become part of the culture, part of the training, that people stay involved, they apply their cognition, they think critically, including ask for references, check the references. That would be my fifth.
Yeah, so
My
that's
fifth
sort of
risk.
work flop in terms of people just like
Yeah,
accepting
yeah,
what it gives
yeah,
you. Yeah,
yeah,
checking.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I'll add a highly commended to this list, if you will. Do people realize that these things have been trained on the entirety of human recorded knowledge, and humans are wildly biased and unfair and racist and sexist and all the isms. And those things have been baked into our AI tools. And they try and put guardrails in there to keep them out, but they are there, and we need to be aware of that and checking for them.
yeah. Cool. I will finish with one last question, and it's going to basically back to people and culture. What's the biggest cultural failure mode that you see most often in organizations?
Well, it starts at the top. So the failure mode is that it hasn't started at the top.
Right.
The senior leadership team, including the CEO, are not AI literate. They're not AI capable, and therefore they're unable to lead. Put aside the technical um, benefits of the technology, they're unable to lead the cultural change. They're unable to like engage with the conversations that their people are having themselves and thinking, what does AI mean for our company, our industry, for me? What does it mean for my job? What does it mean for my cognition? What does it mean for my identity? What does our leadership believe about this technology? Are they going to bring it in? And if they do bring it in, are they going to bring it in to enable us? Are they going to train us? Or are they going to bring it in just to slash and burn and get rid of 30% of us? So the that's I think you asked, that's the one that's front and center for me um, is the senior leadership in a place with their own capability and their own literacy that they can engage with that conversation and be a part of shaping it. If not, nothing else can happen. Those five strategic building blocks, none of it can happen unless the senior leaders are capable and literate themselves.
Right. Excellent. All right, Mark. So thank you very much. It's been great to have the conversation. Very practical, very grounding. And just in terms of the takeouts, I took really, goes back again. Board and senior executives have to be competent and literate in this area, which will mean they will need a level of training to build their literacy. The adoption credibility gap. So that's one key thing to look at. And if that's not present, if you've got tools well above your capability, then you will get shadow AI coming in. And
Hmm.
as you said, 75 to 80% of people in organizations are using it.
Hmm.
I think the other signs of good use would be other senior leaders using it as strategic partners, not just
Yeah.
individual tasks,
Hmm.
benchmarking and measuring outcomes, pilots happening with measurable outcomes. And you said there's obviously softer or squishy ones, which are, the experimentation, building trust capability, as well as some hard ROI measures. In terms of putting some minimum guardrails in place, some obviously robust usage policies, and probably not asking AI for a AI policy. Um, Classifying your data. So, I think that's a really important one. What are you happy for people to play around with? What's restricted? What's in terms of understanding the different levels of risk? And I really like the one where the guardrails, particularly internal, as a risk of data leakage, in terms of making sure that you're locking down sensitive internal data that can't be accessed internally. Um, Dashboard, looking at sort of what percentage of the workforce are using it. Of that, what percentage are using it daily? Measuring capability and literacy, measuring your ROI on your hard case studies, measuring any incidents and escalating those, and then having some way of measuring the cultural integration. So again, if it's being used throughout onboarding, offboarding, recruiting, KPIs, performance management, etc. And then the top
Hmm.
five risks, just the shadow AI, the data leakage, particularly internally, hallucinations being acted on, and falling asleep at the wheel. So they were some
Hmm.
of the takeouts. And yeah, coming back to the biggest failure is not starting at the top, which is what we're talking about here.
It's a
So
great summary, Gerry. I'm happy to put this all together as kind of a one or two pager that I can send to you that you can send to everyone. I'd just love everyone to remember that everything that you've described fits into the adoption capability gap that we describe. And if you consider the capability at the moment is the equivalent of, across hundreds of industries, the equivalent of people with 14 years of industry experience. The top tools are performing at that level. If we're still performing at this level, that's the gap. And that gap is either the opportunity of our era or the risk.
Cool. And there's one last question. I'll just throw it in. What's the next leap? Is there another leap coming that people are seeing around AI, or who knows what's coming next?
Well, are you referring to Benny's question in the chat?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Benny, I just answered that. Yes, from that perspective, AI is starting to create itself. The latest model from ChatGPT, the latest model from Claude, AI had a significant part in building itself there. But to me, that's like irrelevant. That's just an incredible curiosity, right? It doesn't mean anything to people. I said we're all about being practical.
Yeah.
The next leap that we're going through is this agentic AI, where it can act autonomously for minutes or hours to achieve outcomes for you without it. It's now about we use AI based on our delegation skills, the same way we delegate and manage work with humans. We're now doing with AI, rather than up until now, it's been a co-pilot era where we use and we have to say every single step of the way, do this, do that, do this, do that. We have to be in it. Now, for me, the world, and I'm focused on New Zealand and New Zealand organizations, the world hasn't mastered even the co-pilot era yet of how do you use these things as a co-intelligence. I'd love people just to still be here and to master this. Then we can get you to the agentic era, and I don't even want you to look at like what's coming down the track.
I want to get to this one question here. It's from Samati. I'm not literate in this space, so if I put my financials over the last 5 years and get AI to analyze, does that go worldwide? I would say the first thing, Samati, is probably get literate and make sure that you've got people in your organization that are locking down so that your financials can't go external. Would that be the right answer, Mark?
Yeah, it's a great answer, because if you are literate and you know how to use the tools, the answer is no. It definitely won't, because you've switched off the right things. If you're not literate and you haven't switched off those things, then maybe it can. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So if you're a director or CEO and you want a simple way to structure this, Govern 365 is designed to help assess your governance maturity and turn it into an action plan. So we will help assess where you've got blind spots. Digital and IT is one of the areas we look at, which will cover AI from the opportunity perspective, but also from the risk, and also things like data, privacy, etc. So the goal is simple for us: make governance easier, clearer, and more effective. So we'll share a short summary and takeaway after this webinar. Thanks everyone for joining. Mark, thanks again. It's been really appreciate your time. Any last message you'd like to leave people with?
I think I've got there too early, but this is the technology of our era and the coming eras. We see the adoption to capability gap is fast becoming a chasm in New Zealand, and depending on your level of capability and literacy, it is either the largest opportunity that you have personally and for your organization, or it can be an existential risk. We're here to help you choose the former.
Right. Excellent. All right, Ngā everyone. Have a great day. And next one, we're going to continue the theme in the IT world. We're going to be talking about cybersecurity. So that's one that a number of people have asked about. So we'll do that in April. So have a great day. Take care. Thank you, Mark. All the best. And good luck, everyone, experimenting and piloting.
Thanks, Gerry.